Welcome back, climbers. You're listening to another episode of Climbing Mount CMMC. In today's episode, Bobby and Adam are going to get personal about their CMMC journey and why they decided to jump into the space to begin with. So buckle up, sit back, and enjoy today's episode. Hi climbers, today we are going to be talking with Bobby and Adam about why Axiom decided to join the CMMC ecosystem. What are some of their fears going into it? What have they learned? We're going to get into really a lot of questions that a lot of you have asked us via YouTube or LinkedIn. And we're really excited to talk about some new steps that we're taking as a company. So first, I'd love to let's zoom out for a second, okay, Bobby and Adam, and we're just going to talk a little bit more specifically to Bobby about why you wanted to start an MSP in the first place. Like, what drove you to even start this journey?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty scary. I had been serving and working doing IT things for several companies. In 2002, like the company I was working for had some financial difficulties, and I'm like, all right, I want to go ahead and start my own business. And it was super scary to step out on my own. I didn't have any investors. Judy, my wife, and I kind of talked about it, and we just went after it. And it's been a wild ride. So, we've been an MSP since 2002. So in dog years, that's like forever. And we've learned a lot. Like when I first started doing it, it was just me driving around, and I could only see like 4 clients in a year. Or not a year, a day. It felt like a year, but I could only see 4 of them because at the time there wasn't a good remote support methodology. So if you wanted to support a client, you got in your car and you drove out there and helped them. You couldn't just remote in and support them because, there wasn't like Screen Connect or Splashtop or TeamViewer or any of these other remote support things. None of that was really around yet. At a level that was safe and secure to use at a mass scale with a lot of clients.
Because I think just to put things in perspective on that, 2002, the iPod was a thing. We were still carrying our Sony Walkman CD players.
Yeah.
The iPhone didn't exist yet. Like that was a while ago.
Yeah,
Right.
It was, in technology terms, it was a completely different planet to do what we did.
Right, exactly.
And managed services like we think of today didn't even exist then. It was more just purely break fix. Someone called you, you drove out there and you tried to help them. But over the years, it's evolved into a more proactive approach. And that's something that it took some time for me to learn as we grew to understand. You got to be proactive. You got to try to help the client. You have to understand their business. That's why our tagline is, your success is our business. Like you have to be as a client successful, because if they're not successful, we're failing them. They're paying us to provide the efficiency and security so they don't have to look over their shoulder. And once we started to understand really what that sacred duty was, it transformed the business and how we operated, how we think, how we hold ourselves accountable. It was quite the journey.
So now that you have kind of zoomed out on the MSP, Axiom as a whole, now Axiom has decided to really change how they operate as a company, what they're striving for in the sense of the CMMC ecosystem now, right? So now we are climbing this mountain of CMMC and specifically, certification. And so let's talk about why you decided to step into this space. So now that you have been an MSP for over 21 years, right? Now, you've decided to switch to something a little bit different. Well, a lot of it different, a lot of money different, a lot of time different. So let's talk about that, because that's a really big decision for you that you've made. What made you decide to make that decision?
Well, I mean, first off, like we're not doing just that. We still are serving our existing clients that we had, but what we realized is that the defense industrial base was going to need somebody that had a passion for what we started back in 2002 and really had and grew as a company and wanted to do.
Right.
And we wanted to provide that into that space, because as we started some years ago, trying to get more into making sure that we were providing that level of security that we need to, Me and Adam talk about all the time about where that bar needs to be for our clients. Like, you want to make sure that you're not the lowest fruit on the tree, because that you're going to get hit by the threat actors. You want to make sure that your security posture is well and above, and that you have that bar in a position where your organization is safe and secure and you can operate. And so we wanted to do that. And we saw that as CMMC was coming out, we're like, this is going to be a challenge for a lot of companies. We love what we do, but could we do that in that space? And so that started the journey. And as I was doing it on my own, we've been on this journey for about 3 years now, I guess, roughly. And I started and I went and got my CCP, got certified in that. Then I tried to say, let me try doing this on my own. And I realized that it was such a massive beast to undertake. I'm like, I can't do this on my own. So last year I reached out to Adam and said, hey, we've been talking over the years of just casual conversation as peers. I know you have a passion for CMMC and NIST. How about you come over here and let's try to do something that is very unique that not many MSPs, if any, have done. And you were very excited about that, right, Adam?
Yeah, I think I guess there's a little chance to get into my backstory on this. So, I've pretty much worked in MSPs pretty much my entire career. And one day at a few MSPs ago, was sitting there. I get a service ticket from a client. They they made aircraft components as well as other just precision manufacturing. Small shop, less than 100 people, just 20 minutes down the road. So local community, all that fun stuff, family-owned business, all that jazz. And they said, hey, we need help with this cybersecurity compliance stuff for one of our DoD contracts called NIST 800-171. Can you help us out with that? And I said, ooh, cybersecurity compliance. That sounds fun. How bad could this be? Yeah, that was very young and naive of me, but it was my first taste into that. Worked with a couple other companies and continued to kind of grow my career in that, but I kept always finding myself coming back to those frameworks and those standards. And 800-171 really kind of kept my attention. For those that don't know, I'm a huge aviation nerd and all that other fun stuff. And CMMC kind of got started because of just the sheer amount of confidential data that just leaked out of the supply chain
Right.
to our adversaries. Jacob Horn has done a really good history of CMMC video, and you can directly trace some of these requirements that we're dealing with back to the theft of intellectual property data from aviation systems.
Right.
So here we are full circle, where that's all kind of come together. And continue to try to focus on that, but CMMC 800-171, like, that's not the majority of SMBs out there. It's a big hill for for MSPs to tackle. And I was sitting there trying to think through my next steps in my career and everything, and I get this message from this guy named Bobby on LinkedIn, and I'm like, oh, I haven't talked to him in a while. Wonder what's going on. And sure enough, that was the, hey, I know this might be a long shot, but would you be interested? And just perfect timing, right opportunity, and the rest is history, so to speak.
Well, I don't know of very many, if any, MSPs that are this far down the path of being ready. At the time of this recording, we went through our gap assessment, and like, we picked our C3PO. They're actually in the process of auditing us and going through all of that. We have to get prepared for that. It's a massive commitment. We're going to do a video to talk about that more specifically. That'll be coming out soon. If it hasn't already, I'm not, we're never really sure the order of what the podcasts are going to be released in.
Only Kaylee knows.
Yeah.
That's where it gets to me.
Yeah. And so, but we get a lot of questions about people, like, the number one question I get from MSPs is what, Adam? I'm curious to see if you're thinking the same thing I am. But what's the common question your peers that want to ask you about, being an MSP doing CMMC, trying to get it set up? What's the number one thing they ask?
Usually, boy, are you crazy trying to do this?
Right. Or time, right? They want to know, like, how much time investment, because a good managed service provider, one of the things they have to think about is, if I'm implementing or having to set up something, what am I looking down the barrel of having to do?
Right.
And I would be lying if I didn't say I wasn't eating a healthy dose of concern and fear about that, and trying to make sure that we handled it with the right level of responsibility to make sure that we rose to the occasion of that, because those controls, those 110 controls, are no joke, and they're very hard to implement for just a company by itself. But as a managed service provider, you have to then turn around and provide and help provide those to your clients.
Yeah.
That's not easy to do. And we have a video where we've talked about the cost, and we're going through that in more detail, so you can refer to those. But that was something that was really scary, because we couldn't go to a peer group and say, hey, how long is this going to take? Nobody knew that. But we had a passion for the industry, because we grew up knowing and loving and wanting to be in this and serve the community. And we saw immediately in the DIB space that there was going to be a huge void of MSPs like us that had the experience and that passion to provide that for them. And we're like, we've got to get into this space. This is what we want to do. It's not going to be easy. But we love working hard at this. And this is going to give us an opportunity for us to differentiate ourselves, to really show the people that we really care about this community, and we're willing to do the work that's required to make that happen.
Right.
Yeah, and I think to your point on that, the DoD themselves have said just there's tens of thousands of small businesses in the supply chain working directly with the DoD. That doesn't take into account all the small to medium businesses that are subcontractors of those other businesses.
Right.
So this supply chain is huge, and when you look at the data that comes out of the U.S. government, most small businesses are in fact they're small. I think the majority of them are less than 10 employees. The majority that we deal with and see on a regular basis are less than 100 employees. And these aren't just some random person that set up a shop. They're, especially where I'm from out of Northeast Ohio, they're machine shops that have been in their families and their generation, for generations. That one I mentioned, I think as of, if I'm remembering correctly, they would have been in business for over 100 years at this point.
Wow.
A lot of rich history and dedication, for being in that.
Yeah, a lot of good,
that's
hard-working
sacred.
folks.
You've got to care about that. And the data that we have for our country is important to have. And so we felt like we had a higher calling. And I knew that Adam had felt the same way, as we'd had some casual conversations about it. So I was like, I got to reach out to this guy and see how we can get him to come on board and really go after this.
Yeah.
And it has been a crazy hard journey for us to do. Wouldn't you say, Adam?
Oh, absolutely. But it's was always told, work is supposed to be hard. And there's that hard work that's just worth doing. And CMMC is one of those. Just to kind of bring that home, something that came up in a random phone call with a member of our team over the last week. Like I said, I'm a huge aviation nerd. So down in Dayton, we've got the National Museum of the United States Air Force. And they just put out on display at one of the KC-10 aerial refueling tankers. I mentioned that to one of our teammates who served in the Air Force, and it turns out the plane that just went on display was one of the planes he likely worked on when he was in the Air Force.
Yeah.
So this is coming full circle now, because not only is it having that direct impact on us as a country, us as a community, but it's impacting our team as well. Because we do have several members on the team who are former military.
Yeah.
And this kind of work directly goes to show what they, goes to show, and words are apparently hard today. I need more coffee. But it directly impacts what they do, because when our teammate would have been working on that plane, he's got to get those screws, those tools, etc. If those schematics and that sensitive data falls into the wrong hands, that could be a huge problem for those warfighters. And that's kind of that personal mission for us, to really make sure we're getting it right in a way that kind of envelops that protection of country, our service back to our community, and just work that we enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's really important, and a reason why we got into this space, is there's going to be a rich history that's developing over time in this ecosystem. There just isn't many, if any, MSPs that have come in. And it reminded me of when I started my company. It reminded me of being part of that story of growing and being better and serving the community. Like to me, I was like, this is a thing. This is a big thing. This is a huge deal.
Yeah.
As the DIB is now switching to compliance and having to really take into consideration the security and well-being of the industry as a whole, and having to implement these security controls, implementing the certification, staying up to compliance levels, maintaining that, it's going to require a huge amount of dedication.
Absolutely.
And I am just gobsmacked at how much of a responsibility it is, and how few people are up to snuff to be ready to do it. I have very real concerns that we're going to have enough MSPs to support the need and demand that is going to come our way.
Yeah.
We're kind of more of a boutique MSP. I mean, we might take 15, 20 new clients a year, if that. And the DIB space is going to need thousands in the first year of potential audits and organizations that are going to need to be taken care of. And they're going to need an MSP like us that's going to be level 2 certified. We're thinking that probably in the first year, Adam, less than 10 MSPs will probably have a level 2 certification?
Yeah, it's going to be a small number. Just because, going back to our previous episodes and whatnot, climbing this mountain isn't easy.
Yeah.
And it takes plenty of time, and we'll definitely be getting into that a lot more. But I know there's been plenty of MSPs that have been kind of watching from the sidelines the whole time saying, we're not sure if this is what we want to do or not.
Right.
And that it's getting very real that those decisions are going to have to be made. And the unfortunate thing is we know from the proposed rules that have come down and the final rules even, that SMBs selecting an MSP within the space have to select an MSP that's been certified. And that's huge. There's not a ton of MSPs that have gone down that road yet. We know there are more in the wings waiting to go down that road or in the queue to get assessed themselves. Yep. But still, when you look at the sheer amount of SMBs in the DIB, there's not enough.
So, I mean, we need you. If you're a managed service provider and you're listening to this, you need to get in the space. You need to, it's a huge commitment. It's a very, very big deal, but you're desperately needed because, I mean, people are worried about the amount of assessors and the audit and certification bodies, they're called C3POs. Are they going to have enough organizations that can do the audits? But I think the number one limiting factor is going to be companies like us. There's just not going to be very many of them. And it's going to be a real problem for the SMBs. And so we need you, to step into that space. And we're kind of doing this video in hope to show people about why we got into the space and hopefully encourage others to step into it as well.
Yeah. Something that I love about how you guys are talking about this is the selfless nature that you've taken to the climb of CMMC. And what I mean by that is many of you guys, I don't feel like we fully explained why we even wanted to call this, or we decided to call this podcast Climbing Mount CMMC. But one of the main reasons is we wanted to, as a company, climb it so that we could help our clients up and it would be easier for them. If you're on a trail and there is somebody that went before you, right? Maybe cleared some bushes away and whatnot, that climb is going to be easier for you. And that's part of the reason why we called this Climbing Mount CMMC, is because we wanted to climb it to be able to help others after, which reflects a lot about how you guys are talking as well, and the selfless nature of, caring for other companies and caring for the United States, and in the government contracting. And I think that leads in to the next question that I was going to ask you guys, which is, and we've touched on parts of this, but it is a climb. There are fears going into this space. What were your top fears when entering into the space? Maybe they have changed since climbing this mountain, right? You could say maybe what your first fears were, and then now going into helping clients and whatnot. What are some of your fears going into that? Bobby, maybe if you have one, you can share first, and then I'll kick it over to Adam.
I think the first fear that I had was when I kind of mentioned it, is when I sort of did the Google search of who out there has this knowledge that we're going to need to do. Because in our space, like a managed service provider, there's tons of peer groups that you could turn to, and it's highly suggested that you be part of those because they'll help pour into, you get to work with your peers and you get to see a lot of managed service providers, how they do things and do it better. It's great. It's wonderful. There's nothing like that really until just recently. You're starting to see some glimmers of hope of that starting to develop, right? That doesn't exist for anybody in the CMMC space trying to do what we're trying to do. So quickly I realized we are literally the tip of the spear on this. We're that ship that you see in the Arctic that's kind of plowing that stuff. That's us. That's what we're doing. And it's painful. It's hard to do. And we kind of looked at that and said, but we've got a higher calling. Like, that's what we want to do. And I knew that Adam had that attitude, and I know our team did. And that's part of the reason why we really leaned our shoulders in and went after that. But I would say that was my number one fear going into it. It's changed over time. But I'm curious what yours is on.
So when I first got into 800, 171 and everything, I looked at over the controls, was very young and very stupid, and said, this doesn't seem that hard. Like, let's go. Yeah, encryption, let's put encryption in there. Cool. Yeah, not a big deal. But I vividly remember at a conference a good couple years ago, good friend of mine, Joy Belinda, I think she's been a guest on the podcast as well, was speaking about just CMMC and MSPs, and was going through like some of the realities. Are you an MSP that does this? Raise your hand, and we're going down that route. And then she starts talking about the False Claims Act. And my biggest fear at that point was, what have I gotten wrong?
Right.
And what are the consequences of getting it wrong looking like? And that's probably the thing that keeps me up at night. And Bobby, you've known from as we've worked through this, like, I will pick apart our controls, our interpretation to the nth degree to try to figure out every possible way this could go wrong. So as you're saying, oh, I want to do it this way, I'm coming at you with here's the 20,000 reasons this can blow up in our face. How are we going to handle that? What are we going to do about this? To the point where finally I can still keep speculating about all the things that can go wrong, but we're going into those weird scenarios of, every planet has to align at the exact date and time, and then this one thing has to happen for it to blow up in our face. But I think that's just our own way of risk managing the process. Yeah. But still, it still keeps me up at night, especially when we think through clients and we know that it's their businesses, their livelihoods on the line. Because if, I get it wrong in those instances and they don't get a contract, does that mean someone just lost their job because they were hurting financially? That has a direct impact on families. And I would be terrified to think that could be the result of just a sentence I say being taken out of context or something along those lines.
That's so right. I literally woke up last night having I'm not joking, a nightmare about failing the assessment based on just one simple thing. Because if you look at the current scoring methodology of how the CAP is written, 60% of the 110, let's just call them questions, but they're actually controls, but let's just simplify it and say 110 of the questions on the test, let's just make it super simple, over 60% of them, if you get any of them wrong, doesn't matter what your score is, any of them wrong, it's a fail. It's a straight fail. Like, what test have you ever taken that is scored that way? None. Like, I'm going to take the SAT, but if I get 60% of, any of those 60% questions wrong, I just failed. Doesn't matter if I got 99%, whatever. It's like, it's a straight fail. When you deal with that level of razor edge assessment, and you'd factor in just what Adam was talking about, that these are these companies' livelihoods. They've got lots of people. There's a ton of pressure riding on the shoulders of the MSPs that step into that space. I might not really be selling it really well for those MSPs that are thinking about getting into the space. Are like, that doesn't sound great. It is great. And that I believe it's a service that is a higher calling and it needs to be done. Yeah. But there's more to it than that, obviously.
But I think that's those kind of MSPs, like your kind of MSPs, the way that you guys are thinking, that's what clients want. And I'm guessing that's what they need. Because on the other hand, there are people that might not take this as seriously and might share a few lies here and there to try to convince somebody to go with them. And they don't actually care about that business. It might be stressful for you and Adam and maybe other MSPs out there that really do care about those people. It's going to be stressful because, you're carrying these clients on your back, but that's what they need is somebody who cares for them, So I think although it might be scary, that should be inspiring to other MSPs listening to this that may care just as much as you do about their clients.
If you do care, this is a great place to be. The DIB industry is a small knit group of people and they help each other. I mean, we're part of other managed service team now that, like I said, it just this MSP CyberX, which Brian Hubbard started. We're part of that now. There's the Protection for Critical Infrastructure, which is Neo Systems, Summit 7, and there's another bigger companies. They kind of came together. So you're starting to see that peering that's starting to happen, and they're all sharing and talking because they realize that like there's more need than any of us can handle. So we need people to be involved in.
Absolutely. So I want to end today with ask you, we talked about the fears, but let's talk about the inspiration for a second. Like what inspired, we'll talk with Adam first. Let's ask Adam first. Adam, what inspired you to get into this space personally? Maybe not just as an Axiom as a company itself, but you personally getting into the CMMC ecosystem.
For me, it was just that happy accident that kind of worked out in the end. Like I said, I got that service ticket from that initially kicked everything off. But once I started drilling into it, it made my brain happy. It made the brain produce all those happy chemicals that we all love and and appreciate. And it was the big challenge and the big puzzle, because you have all those individual controls as assessment objectives, and then you got to figure out how to implement them.
Mhm.
And I love being able to figure those things out. And then when you take that, you implement it, everything happens. You can start to see the direct result that it has in those businesses when they're like, hey, we got that government contract. Oh, cool. And they're like,
Right.
check this out. We just made a bolt that went on the International Space Station. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's freaking cool. Or like, here's this washer that goes in this jet engine. And I'm like, okay, cool. Here's the fuel pump internals for this one. I'm like, I don't know what this hunk of metal is, but it looks really cool, and then it's going to do something cool. So it's cool to be able to watch that journey as you work through those engagements, and then finally see the finished product at the end where you're just like, that's pretty neat.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's kind of how it fits for me.
I love it. What about you, Bobby?
I love serving. I love helping. And I just saw this industry needing a ton of help. They were going to need a lot of help. They were going to need somebody that had a passion and care for it. And that's what I love to do. I really do. I do enjoy it. And I'm like, we're going to be able to step into this space and take that passion and care that we have and know that we're going to be able to do it. Now, yes, there's an opportunity for growth. Yes, there's an opportunity to generate revenue. But it's not a money grab, because you've got to think about it from the perspective of a lot of these companies have been in generational, passing down of these manufacturing companies. So it's not like they're just sitting on this mountain of cash and there's some, prime organization. Those aren't the companies we're probably going to be working with. We're going to be dealing with the companies like Adam was talking about. And so how can we provide that CMMC experience and certification and guidance? It's not going to be cheap. I think a good Adam saying is none of the C's in CMMC stand for cheap. They are not. So it's going to be an expensive proposition, but it's not like, we got into this because we thought, boy, this is going to be gold in them there hills. Let's just mine the crap out of it.
Yeah.
These companies need to still be profitable, so we have to be able to provide that for them. And that's how we've always been when we weren't in the space. And we're taking that mentality. We want to come in this space. We want to serve the community, and we want to be able to help provide that compliance. And we just saw a lot more opportunity for us to do that. And I like the fact that there is certification requirements that level the playing field. It's harder for a client to pick a managed service provider if any of them can kind of step into the shadows and pretend like they know what they're doing. And it's hard for the client to figure that out. But now that us MSPs have to be assessed, they can't cheat that. They have to know the controls. They have to pass. We all have to jump that hurdle before we can participate appropriately in the space. And I just thought that was awesome. Because then it forces us to eat our own dog food and really do what we say we're doing, and be able to, like you're saying, Kaylee, and I love the little diagram that we have, or not the diagram, but the intro video of that person helping that person up onto the hill. Like that's what we're trying to do. And we have to be there first.
Yeah.
We've got to be on that hill. And that just excited me. I know it's crazy hard, and it has been crazy hard, and it's going to be a difficult journey. But we're excited about being on top of the hill and helping other people get there. And it's just something that we've just got a passion for. It's hard to explain, I guess.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, a rising tide raises all ships. So
yes, absolutely.
That's kind of part of this whole thing too. Why I started doing more speaking engagements and getting out there, just to basically take all the lessons learned, those fears that kept me up at night, those wins that I've gotten, share those with the community so that we can all be a little bit better, so we can all do our part, help out, and make the world a slightly better place than we found it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Adam and Bobby, for sharing your perspective on this. I love this episode for two reasons. One, I hope that it gets our listeners to know a little bit about Axiom and who we are behind this podcast, and who these people are that they hear a lot from every Thursday, but also to the inspiration of inspiring people that maybe haven't gotten into the space yet to get into the space if this resonates with them and their company. Or maybe it's somebody who's on the climb that's feeling a little defeated right now to keep going, and you've got this and you can get there, and we're there too, and so I really hope that was inspiring to you or helped you just a little bit on your climb as a company. But also, if you guys have any questions to Bobby or Adam,
Absolutely.
or our business as a whole, or maybe other people in the community, please feel free to comment on either our YouTube videos or our LinkedIn. You can see Adam and Bobby on LinkedIn. And we'd love to connect with you. Again, like, we do believe this is a partnership, and we want to connect with you guys. So we don't want this to just be one-sided. So if you guys have anything to share, questions you have, please feel free to share it with us. And make sure to like our podcast or follow so that you can be connected with us anytime we post new content or share a new episode out with you guys every Thursday morning. Thank you guys for tuning in, and just remember to keep on climbing. Bye, guys. Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube to stay up to date on the latest CMMC news. We hope you guys enjoyed today's episode and listen out for the next one. But until then, keep on climbing.